All right, good afternoon, everyone. We are at 4:16, and we've not had a snow day this week. Yay, that's great. I know. What's that? No, we are not going to. So I'm going to start with answering a few questions that have come in. And just so we can get through those, because sometimes we have not made those up. So the first question is asking about makeup days and snow days. Surprise. I'm watching the weather this week because there's still snow. And we'll hopefully make an announcement about that tomorrow afternoon. Here's my goal. I know I'm live, but here's my goal. My goal is that we don't go into that second week in June, so we don't have to come back at the beginning of a week. And so right now I think the last day for elementary is on a Wednesday and high school's on a Thursday. So the goal will be to get to the hours without bumping into that next week, but that really depends on that we have no more snow days. So if we get to tomorrow, no late start or anything, I may come out with the first round of here's what we'll do for makeup by tomorrow afternoon, early next week for sure. We'll get that out. And then, but the question mark we still are going to have is around our construction schools. So those 5 schools, we've got to spend a little more time with deciding what they do, because what we know is that we've got to get in those schools for construction as soon as possible. So North, McNary, Waldo, Judson, Gubser might have a different end to the school year, but we'll get all that out in an announcement within, it's more likely probably the beginning of next week. So the other question, there came a question about, are we getting more Chromebook carts next year? And the answer to that is our goal, dependent on budget. So we still have seen the need out there for Chromebook carts, especially in the elementary with iReady Math. So that's our goal if we have budget to do it. So we're keeping a really close eye on those needs. The next question came up about elementary principals staying in their schools for more than a couple years, and they observed that there was some turnover, and especially of some of our high needs schools, and are wondering why we would purposefully do that. And the answer to that is we don't purposefully do that. Actually, our goal is longevity, and especially in our very complex schools, but there are absolutely some schools that have had a rotation of principals for a variety of reasons that have been a bit out of our control. So know that our goal is around stability and continuity of leadership in those buildings, especially our most complex schools. There's a question about storage for Ready Gen materials, and I have not vetted is this possible through facilities yet and central stores, so I'm going to push that question off until I can see if that's a possibility. The question is around, is there a way to have a warehouse where we can store some of these extra materials until we have classrooms of kids that need them, and then get them from central stores or a warehouse. Teachers at the middle school level are wondering if about the 7-period day. We're continuing to monitor that, and we're also monitoring that in terms of budget. So that's a budget-driven discussion, but I want you to know it's high on Matt Biondi, the middle school director's mind, and we're constantly talking about that. So he's thinking about it and also trying to decide what would be the strategy and the timeline if there were additional dollars around a schedule change. And I think the other questions, there's a question about students transitioning from 5th to 6th grade, and that they've heard us have a lot of focus on kids transitioning from 8th to 9th grade, and why aren't we putting that same attention on 5th to 6th grade? Great question. We continue to watch that 5th to 6th grade transition. A number of our middle schools do have summer transition programs. 8th to 9th grade, that Measure 98 funding that's come to us for career and technical ed and high school success, we've been using some of that funding 8th to 9th grade. So that's why you're seeing us put additional focus on it, is we have funding to focus on it. Measure 98, we cannot use below 8th grade. So, and then Lillian's going to take the last question because I didn't have a chance to say I 100% for sure knew the answer, even though I kind of know the answer.
Okay.
There it is.
Thank
right
you.
there.
Yeah. So there was a question about the use of Broadway Commons and their stance in the church community, particularly around issues like LGBTQ, et cetera. And so that's incredibly important to us. And of course, I've spent the last 48 hours on the news cycle talking about what a wonderful, safe, and welcoming school district we are and how we don't tolerate discrimination. Because we aren't signing a contract with them that says that we will subscribe to any sort of moral code, et cetera, that they may hold, that helps us kind of insulate ourselves from that from that church. We also have, Boys and Girls Club. We have Salvation Army. We have YMCA. We have outdoor school. We have a number of situations where we have contracts with people who may hold certain beliefs that we don't necessarily subscribe to, but because that language of the contract says that I can be as gay as I want to be, then we feel comfortable that we are in a place where we are still maintaining ourselves as a district that doesn't discriminate, that is a safe and welcoming school district. Obviously, for budgetary reasons, we try our best to schedule meetings like at North Salem High School. When we go into the bond measure, we're going to have fewer places like North Salem High School to meet. So it may mean that we need to be creative, but we will never sign a contract with anyone that makes us subscribe to or uphold a certain belief that isn't safe and welcoming like our school district is.
All right. I'm going to talk about budget, and then we'll go into bond and boundary changes. Budget. So I think this is where we were last month. The governor's budget came out in December. I said it's kind of a status quo current service level budget. Current service level means we can roll up exactly what we have today and be barely okay, but okay. You will hear Beaverton, Portland, Hillsborough, and I think there might be another one or two that will be announcing budget reductions. We will not be in that state at the governor's budget. So, deep breath. It's still, though, not enough for what we know. We don't have enough adults in our system, across the system. Today, the co-chairs came out with their budget. Generally, the co-chair's budget has been higher than the governor's. It's actually lower than the governor's budget. It came in about $100 million lower than the governor's budget. I think it's a point in time. I'm not ready to say we think that's what we're going to get. But what I am having to say publicly, and to our legislators especially, is that co-chair's budget is actually a reduction budget for us. So no, I have to say that publicly because I do not want to let our legislators know that 8.87, whatever it is enough. But I still believe we can get the governor's budget at a minimum. So I'm going to talk about what that means publicly, but I'm sticking with that right now. I'm really hopeful we can at least be at a current service level, even as those districts around us are reducing by hundreds of educators in some case. I know, it's like heartbreaking. So no, I promise you, if the strategy is going to change, I will let you know in our communication groups. I hope that my crystal ball is right. I usually have a pretty good pulse on it. If we have to change strategies, though, I'll let you know. So at the co-chair's budget, $100 million reduced from the governor's, it would mean about $3.5 million each year for Salem-Keizer. If you just equated that to licensed educators, which is how we talk about it, because that makes a big difference to our legislators when they hear that, that's about $33 fewer a year. So that's how I'm talking about it. I'm also talking about it in terms of days. Our cost per day is about $1.7 million. And so I know that if we took it in days, that would be 3 days. So I only say it that way to equate it to something that our lawmakers understand. So right now, though, we have our eye on governor's budget. The feedback you gave last time around the school improvement fund dollars, if you were here last time, you remember that activity you did with brainstorming, what would you do with millions more dollars? I took that feedback along with feedback from a couple other places and rolled it up into a very high-level summary of that is our funding advocacy poster. And so know that your feedback is in there, even if you don't see your words, because I was limited to 200 words. So we heard a lot about the middle school schedule. We heard a lot about class size. I put it in as lowering class size and adding more adults across the system. So if you see that poster, that's what that means. More adults across the system. What I'm hoping to do, if there's still promise of some school improvement fund dollars, is to come back to you in April or May and take kind of what the lists of things have been across other groups and this group, and then help have you do a prioritization exercise so that we can look at what are the most important priorities in the system if we have additional dollars with the school improvement dollars. So that's how your feedback has gone into the first step, which is that advocacy poster, and how it will show up in the coming months. I don't think we're going to know anything about school improvement dollars until June, which is awkward, but I think that's a reality. The other reality is that if there are additional dollars, it will be tied to a revenue package. And there's a 90% chance that a revenue package can be referred to the voters in November. So how that all plays out and when money comes to us, I don't have a great crystal ball on that yet. But I will, every month I get a little more information and have a little better ability to guess what we will have. What I don't want to do is have us get worry too much about reductions or spend too much time thinking about ads if it's not even a possibility. So I'm also trying to juggle that balance of when to get input, because we do need to think about what if there was many more additional dollars. Right now in the school improvement fund, they are hoping for $1 billion in the school improvement fund, and to Salem-Keizer, that would be $34 million a year. And that would be a big deal, that we have to really think carefully about how do we invest that in the adults that make a difference in our schools every day. So that's my budget update. You'll get it every month this time. If you see something that makes you question what's going on, really send me an email. It's really important to have really tight communication right now and that people don't worry. And when we start getting news of budget reductions in Beaverton, that will worry our staff in Salem-Keizer. And we have to keep going with, nope, superintendent hasn't said anything about budget reductions. If that changes, she'll let us know. Okay. Yes.
I just have a question, and I'm trying not to panic.
Okay.
But I also know in our current state of the funding,
Yep.
so if we were at exact same funding next year, we're still feeling the struggle
I
of
agree.
being enough adults.
Yep.
Is there, because I don't know how budgets work, the ability to reallocate funding to ease some of that? And I'm only asking because every day this week I've had a staff member in my room in tears saying they can't do it anymore. And so whether we get funding or don't get funding or have reductions, we still are in a crisis that I'm trying to figure out a way to reassure, especially especially the newer teachers that
Yeah.
can't do it anymore,
Mhm.
and they haven't been here long enough.
Mhm.
It's frightening, and I don't know the right way to say something might help.
Yeah, yeah.
Even if money doesn't change.
Yeah, I do think we are trying to look really carefully for that exact reason across every function. And unfortunately, I mean, it's, even if you think about custodians as another example, horribly understaffed. So it's like, okay, thinking about what parts of OBL need to be out in schools, how do you relieve pressure? So we're having all those conversations, and unfortunately, we're really tight across. That's what every school system is facing. It's adults everywhere. The short answer is yes, we can. If we find really strong arguments too, because we know the crisis is there. So, but I don't have a great answer for you yet. Like,
That's the scary part. And it's what it is. It's custodians, it's office staff,
it's,
support staff.
yep,
It's everybody.
it is,
And,
yep,
when we're not well as employees, we're not able to serve the kids.
Yep.
we need to serve.
yep, 100% agree, yep. That's my messaging. Anytime I talk to anyone that has power over dollars, is the thing that will change outcomes for kids, and sometimes life and death for kids, is many adults, licensed educators, classified, many adults in our system that change the trajectory for kids. And they have to be paid. You can't do it with volunteers. So I sat with the Joint Ways and Means Committee on Education today, and they, of course, are the ones that are thinking about dollars. And to a person on that, there are representatives that get it. I just hope they can do something about it. So if you have great ideas, I'd love them. Okay. Thank you, Courtney. Mike.
Lillian's going to help with the boundary process a little bit, give you an update. Let me start with the bond. So you've heard all this before, right? So it's a fairly schizophrenic conversation following the superintendent, because we're talking about not having enough money for operations, but yet we have hundreds of millions of dollars to spend on our facilities, right? But we all know that those can't be used for operational things. So it does feel kind of weird, but we have the next wave of projects that are starting their design work. So Chrissy talked about the first 5. The next wave is where we really start to add to the list of projects. So there'll be about 18 that go into design this year, which means they'll be moving into construction next year. Our next 2 high schools are McKay and South, and those design teams have already started. Auburn starts, the design team starts next week. That's our biggest elementary school. You may remember in the lead up to the bond, we were talking about a new elementary school, and then renovating Auburn to be like an early learning pre-K hub. And of course, things changed, as they do, and so we're able to purchase Auburn Park. For those of you who know the area, you'll know that it's about 4.4 acres, which really allows us to get in and redesign the whole flow of Auburn, because as you know, if you've ever been there at either the beginning or the end of the day, it's not really where you want to be. For a number of reasons, it's not very efficient or safe, quite frankly. So we're able to get in there, and Auburn's been pushing about 700 kids for a while. We're heading in that direction, but with a school that was originally designed for about 425, right? So we're really excited about that project as well. And then what happens is, the year that it's in design, the next year it moves into construction. So like I said, 2020 is when the wave really starts moving through the district, and there'll be about 18 or so a year that go into design, and then into construction the next year. So we've front-loaded the program so that we get through about 70% of the cost of the program in the first 3.5 years, which is good, because if you can spend $1 now, you get more value than if you tried to spend it 2 or 3 or 4 years from now. So that's kind of update on the bond. Any questions? We're making progress is kind of the moral of the story. And then the boundary process, I'll let Lillian talk about the logistics, but we've got all of the letters out. I think our information in Synergy is pretty good because we've had just a handful of letters come back to us because they weren't the right address, which is always a concern. So I'll let Lillian give you an update on where we are.
So, who here is having confusion? Let's just address it this way. Who's having confusion at their school in terms of boundaries? We tried so hard to work with our principals, our office managers on the front end to kind of go through all of the process and the problem solving so we could answer as many questions before we went public with it. So, is anyone having particular issues?
I have questions.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Okay. Okay. All right. So questions about Roberts after. Wish, did you see Roberts on NPR? Yes. And hear it on NPR? See it on the website? Such a great story. That was really, it was wonderful to highlight that. Any other questions about boundaries? They're happening. K through 3, 6, and 9 are basically who those boundaries apply to. Now there are siblings. Yes, siblings can stay with the sibling. They go to the new school. We've got some exceptions around programs. We've got to figure out some certain little pieces and where some special education programs are going to be. But for the most part, on our end, and I feel like I try to do a good job of not having my head in the sand, a whole lot of stuff hasn't gotten to me in terms of like angry parents calling the media and then the media calling me and saying, why didn't you guys do this, that, or the other? So it's felt like a smooth process on our end. So if you have any feedback, thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, I'm happy to take those or answer them offline. But we're pleased with the process because with these new spaces, we've got capacity that needs to be utilized in the best manner possible. We also have some schools that need some immediate help, and this will do it gradually. And then by the time we're 5 years into the bond program and we're 5 years into the boundary adjustments, we'll be smooth sailing. And then we'll get to 10 years out, and it'll be a whole nother conversation. Okay?
I lost my agenda. David Fender, where are you? There's some questions about Panorama survey that came in, so we want to be sure David's here to answer those.
Hi, everybody. I've been here before, but it's been a while. David Fender, and I'm the coordinator for the Office of Behavioral Learning. And so part of what we're doing as a new office, this is actually we're 3/4 of our way through our second year. We're pretty new, but is looking at trying to figure out how we measure our students' social emotional learning. So many of you are aware and have access to or have been providing activities related to social emotional learning. So looking at self-management and self-awareness, those 5 competencies and those standards. And so there were some resources that were sent out to you guys towards the end of last year. But when I was talking with my colleagues and other folks across the district, we were wondering how we were going to measure the effectiveness of those materials that are being presented to kids and trying to figure out how do we get information from our kids. As long as I've been here about 16 years, we really haven't asked kids about social emotional learning, or are they feeling safe within their school setting? Do they feel like they have strong relationships with kids in their buildings, with staff within their buildings? And so Panorama is a data platform that we purchased and are using this school year and then into next school year and beyond. How many of you, could you raise your hand if you've actually used Panorama? Okay, a couple of you guys. So at the secondary level, we actually opened the survey about a month ago and got our survey results back. And so about 14,000 kids, middle and high school students participated in that survey. And it was really telling. It was incredible to get information on things like grit, growth mindset, self-awareness, self-management, and their perception on how they do in those specific areas. But we also asked them questions about school climate. So things like, I feel like I belong within my school community. Do you not? And so we were able to gather those 14,000 responses, and this past, I think it was 2 weeks ago, we're able to get together with all of the secondary leadership teams, look at the data that had been collected, and then the Panorama team came and provided a 2-hour training to review the data and then figure out how are we going to use that to impact kids within our school community. So really exciting. We are, the survey window actually is open at the elementary level. So school counselors have received training, and they are kind of the site ambassadors who will be delivering information. It might be your building principal as well. It might be principal and counselor providing some training and support within your elementary school buildings. What we are looking at the elementary level, so there's 2 tests, student competencies. So we're looking at grit, growth mindset, self-management, social awareness, and then we're also looking at student supports and environment, so teacher-student relationships, sense of belonging, and school safety. So there are about 35 questions. I think it takes around 35 minutes within the classroom, and there's actually a mini vocabulary lesson that we present to the kids, because many of these concepts, you guys, are brand new for kids, like their self-awareness, what exactly does that mean? And so the materials are really well done, and so we're excited about exposing that and having kids complete the survey and getting some baseline data on where kids really feel like they're at. And I should mention, it's not all kids at the elementary level. It's 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders this school year. And then we'll talk about what it would look like to have K-5 at the elementary level in the next couple of years. So are there any specific questions that you guys have about Panorama? Yes?
I use first grade, but teachers 3 through 5 in my school had some questions, and they were concerned about the sensitivity of the material, the questions being appropriate for 3rd graders, especially even understanding what that meant.
Yes.
At first, we were told it was K-5, and all of the little volcanic.
Yeah.
First graders, I teach first grade.
Yes.
How would we administer some? How would this look? But even at the 3rd grade level, some of the questions, I had some teachers give me some feedback on that, and they're just really concerned about the sensitivity of the nature of the questions.
Sure.
And not being mature enough to really understand what that means, like giving feedback about your teacher, saying, it's hard to give them feedback as a teacher.
The student-teacher relationship questions, yep.
Those questions that are really sensitive that they might not really understand, because maybe that day you took away something from them.
Yeah. Yep.
Those kinds of things, and also the sensitivity for parents to know what's happening.
Yeah.
Getting information, because there was nothing said to parents or no kind of. I can understand that parents are really involved.
Sure.
You haven't got any feedback on that yet, but just wondering what's going to be the approach when parents start saying, "Oh, I didn't know my kid was answering those questions," and that sensitivity.
Yeah, so we won't have, like, we can't go back and review student-specific responses outside of those social emotional learning competencies. So we'll have kind of a broad sense, but we won't know exactly what students said about their specific teachers. Does that make sense?
So it's like a broad gathering of data, but it's not like, oh, teacher in A7
Exactly.
said da-da-da about.
That's right.
In B5, they just love the teacher. I mean, it's more of a gathering of data.
And if
Compiling.
exactly, and if a student feels uncomfortable, answering the question, they don't have to answer all of the questions. Obviously, we would like them to, but yeah, we have received some feedback.
It could be really valuable because they're starting to become aware of who they are and all that, but
Yep.
before they're still, I've taught those grades and
Yeah,
they're still don't even really know what you're talking about. They're just deep in
exactly.
lessons.
And we're taking it with a grain of salt. Obviously, like you said, depending on that particular day, they could be having a bad day. Maybe they're not. incredibly fond of their teacher, and they may share that on the test. But again, we're not using it in any way as a evaluative tool, or I mean, it's not information that's going to be used against a teacher. And we have received some concerns. You're not the first person that has brought this up. So in planning for next year, that's a conversation we'll have. Are these questions that we want to continue using for next year? Was it helpful? Was it not? So, yeah. Anything else? Yes.
Some time at my school going over the data with our SLT team, and one of the concerns that we had as the teachers on that team were just, we have all this data, it seems like it's going to be one more thing added to the teacher plate. I see nodding over there, that we're just a little bit frustrated at, the lack of time, the 7th grade day for middle school, and now here's one more thing. And, at some point it just starts to become overwhelming, and you just can't do everything even when you see the value in it.
Yeah, no, I agree. You guys are spinning so many plates. I mean, we're all spinning many different plates. What our hope is at this point, obviously teachers have always asked, I get it, I want to teach social emotional learning. I don't have the tools to do it. Can you help me identify tools? And so that's one of the parts of Panorama that we really like, based on the responses that your students provided. And you guys, after your school teams review the data and they kind of identify the direction they're going to go based on that, all teachers will have access to something called Playbook. And so you click on Playbook, very easy to access, and they're evidence-based social emotional learning lessons that you can quickly click on, and they're easy to implement. Teachers have used them across the nation and many other school districts. And I think the emphasis is they understand there's not a lot of time to spend on creating lessons centered around social emotional learning. So what are some easy tools that I can incorporate for about 10 minutes a day? The other piece, I'm sorry, I totally lost that. What did that answer your question, or is there one more?
Comment and a question. That
Yeah,
is,
time to.
even 10 minutes doesn't seem like that much time, but when your class is only 48 minutes to begin with, and then
Yeah.
you take 10 minutes to do that, I mean, your teaching time is just getting less and less, and so now instead of going deep, we're just kind of spreading everybody so thin.
Oh, yes.
It's really more just a comment and a frustration that I know I'm not the only one at my school that feels this way, and I'm sure I'm not the only one in the district, that we just keep piling on and taking away staff, and it's just
Yeah.
another comment.
Yeah. The other piece at the secondary level, obviously at this point, not asking content teachers. I mean, there are teachers who are just naturally embedding that within their classrooms, but I'm really working with Gwen, who's director of academic instruction at the secondary level, to talk about what is this partnership with social emotional learning and academic at the elementary level, but both at the secondary level. So this information is really helpful for our school PBIS leadership teams. They're really taking a closer look at that and then figuring out, what does this mean for school-wide systems? If our students don't feel engaged, or there's a low sense of belonging within their school community, why is that? And what are some things that we can do? We're trying not to add additional things to your plate. We're trying to give you guys more tools to support kids with a variety of different needs. So.
Carolyn, I'd add too, I think for us at secondary, SEL really lives within our culturally responsive teaching practices that we're already doing and we've already been working on for a while. So one of the other things that David and I have been talking about is, where is the crosswalk there and how can we start using the same language so it doesn't feel like another thing? Because really a lot of the SEL competencies are just embedded in that work that we've all been working on already for a couple of years. So that's my concern as well, that it always feels like whenever we have an acronym, it's another thing.
Yeah.
And really it's embedded in the good work that we're already doing, and how we can highlight that and make sure people understand that. So we're just using data to reinforce what we've already been trying to practice in the past.
And the last piece, then I'll hand it over, is we are piloting a family engagement survey as well. So at Auburn, Parish, and North, and soliciting feedback from our parents on some of the same social emotional learning questions. What do they know about social emotional learning? And then also looking at parent-school relationships as well to help, again, refine, hopefully, make positive gains towards parents feeling like they have a strong partnership with schools and engaging parents in a positive way. So anyway, that's it. Thank you.
Suzanne, you're next. All right, we have 2 elementary topics, but others of you will be interested in them too, I'm sure. How about that?
I'm sure too. Maybe. So my topics perhaps will be quick. The first is around the EPR. Some of you may know that we're going through a process right now of updating our elementary progress reports. And I want to give you just a quick update on where we're at with those. We've had 2 meetings so far, and we've done a lot of brain work around how can we simplify the elementary progress reports to accomplish 2 things. One, to present meaningful data to our parents. At the onset, we had a conversation around why do we do this? Why do we even bother to record grades? And yes, there's a statutory requirement, and we should probably do that. But the real reason is that we want parents to understand the progress that their students are making. And right now at the elementary level, we have a 4-page text-heavy document that, based on the feedback we've received, most parents immediately recycle upon receiving. So that's not a useful document for communicating progress. So that's the main purpose for why we communicate those grades. Secondary purpose, of course, is statutory requirements. So where we're at right now, where we think we're heading, is that the EPR will look a little bit different. We don't want to change the way teachers input information. We want that to stay the same, but the output will change. And the conversation that we're having is around this idea of presenting at least some of the progress in a graphical representation. So perhaps in a bar chart, a line chart, a pie chart, some way that parents can very quickly get a glance and a sense of real progress that their students have made over a period of time. We also are talking about how to reduce the amount of text that we present to parents, so there's not quite so much that they need to parse through for those parents who take the time to actually read through the whole document. So we're making really good progress there. We anticipate that we're going to need a couple more meetings at least to produce a couple of samples. And then once we have those samples, we'll take it out to larger stakeholder groups like this group, like parent groups, like others who can give us feedback and tell us if we're heading in the right direction. And then once we have all that feedback and we make our final revisions, we'll have hopefully a new EPR that we can put forth next year. And we'll have some communication for teachers around what that will look like and what changes, if any, may come from that. So I'm going to pause there before getting to my second topic. What questions do you have? Yes? Yes, so the question is it still based on standards? Yes, we still want to report progress towards standards. The conversations we're having are along the lines of whether or not we need 4 pages of standards to accurately report to parents student progress. Does that answer your question? Okay. What other questions can I answer for you? Yes?
I have a question for the primary grades for health, art, social studies, and science. If you're considering looking at that in a whole different way as well.
We are actually. We ended our last meeting around that topic, and do we keep those? Do we not keep those? If we do, how do we report them? We haven't come up with an answer yet. So what I'd encourage you to do, for those of you who are here from the elementary level, if you have some thoughts around that, please email those to me. I'd love to hear those. Our next meeting is next week, and the bulk of the meeting next week will be devoted to this exact topic. So what... Oh, okay. Well... Yeah, that's a great point. What I didn't tell you is how this group came to be. So according to the license contract, this is a joint committee. So Mindy selected 10 individuals to be part of this group. We reached out to staff across the district for those who would be interested as well. So we have 10 additional staff members not selected by Mindy. We have a couple of administrators on the group. We also have Thomas Rommel, who works in the technology department, who's part of this group. The reason we have somebody there from technology is to tell us where our bumpers are. Because if it were up to me, we'd blow the whole thing up and create something completely new and transformative. But we do have real technology limitations that we have to work with. So we have some people like that on the team who are helping us through this process. I hadn't planned to send out a survey. The process is, as I said, we're going to come up with a couple of samples, go out, get some feedback, take that feedback and make revisions based on that. So I really would appreciate it if you have some thoughts around the EPR, send those my way. Again, my name's Suzanne West. You can also forward those to your principal, and your principal can forward those to me. But we really do want to hear from you if you have some ideas for how this can look differently. Yep. Yeah, and that's the... Not yet. That is our work next week, though, so come prepared. Okay, what other questions can I answer for you about the EPR? Yes. Yeah, that's a great question. So our conversation, especially the first one we had, we talked about that quite a bit. You know, we have many parents right now for whom the EPR is inaccessible. Again, because it's very text heavy, it's full of education-ese. So we really tried to take a look at it through that lens of how do we make this information meaningful to all of our parent groups. We've had Thomas bring up, and I think this is an important point for us to consider, that when we do things like translating, English doesn't always translate in the same amount of space into other languages. So we have to be mindful about just the space we take up on this document in terms of how that might translate for the very many families in our district who will receive a translated report card. We have members on our team who are bilingual who are helping to inform what that looks like and how we might report things differently in our dual language or our transitional biliteracy classrooms. So we've really tried to be mindful of questions around equity. And again, I'd ask that you and everybody else who has an opportunity to weigh in on this when we get these samples back, hold us accountable to that. So if you think that we have missed something, don't be afraid to tell us that. What other questions can I answer for you? Yes. Yeah, that's good feedback, and we've talked about that too. We looked at report cards from many different districts and how they report, and some of our colleagues around the state, so what we do is we report on end-of-year standards. Some of our colleagues around the state instead say, this is where your student's at right now, which may facilitate a different kind of conversation. So again, that's our work next week, Courtney. So we'll be diving into that next week to try to answer those questions around what do we report, and how do we report that to parents in a way that makes sense to them? What other questions can I answer for you? Yes?
Have you taken into consideration any EPR for students in special education, especially those who are most impacted in our self-contained programs? You know, it seems like it's just another piece of paper that we're giving to families and the parents
Yeah.
that indicate that their child has a disability, and they're not going to make the gains that typical children would be.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. In fact, at the last meeting we have a couple of educators in there who also have children with disabilities. And at our last meeting, we end every meeting with a debrief. And at our last meeting, one of the educators with a student with disability said almost exactly what you just said, that it would be nice to produce a document that doesn't just tell you that your student has a disability. So I think that's a really good point for us to think about in our work next week and how we might do something a little bit different. I don't know what that looks like yet. But we are mindful of that. Thank you.
Have you collected any feedback from parents who aren't in education with what they actually would want to know about?
Yeah, I've had some principals forward me some feedback that they've received, as well as some educators who aren't part of this group who have received feedback from parents. So we do have some of that information. But again, one of the stakeholder groups that we want to go out to is parents. Because we want to make sure that what we're doing is meeting their need. That's the ultimate goal, because we don't do anything with this once we're done with it. It goes in a CUME file and we never look at it again. So the end user is the parent, and we need to get some feedback from them. What other questions can I answer for you about the EPR? Yes?
Just to clarify, and if you're going to discuss this next week in your meeting, just skip over it, but the biggest complaint I get from parents in the intermediate grades, 3, 4, 5, is the 1 to 4 scoring system, especially kids that are earning a 2. They say, what's a 2? First, but tell
Yeah.
me exactly where my child is. Well, they're 2, they're working on it, They haven't reached that standard yet. And that is so confusing for them. So are you guys going to be looking also at how we are scoring the children on the report card?
We're talking about all of that. Yeah. Don't have an answer for you yet, but it is part of our conversation. Yeah. Any other questions? Yes.
I just want to add for the people, because I am on that committee. It is one of the committees, I've sat on lots over the years, but I leave there and my brain is literally exhausted because we're trying to think outside the box and consider all of these things. And that there is so much to consider, and we really are, as a group, it's a great, diverse group of educators putting all these thoughts, and we come up with all these great ideas, and then are kind of oh, how are we going to make it work? And there's thought after the meeting and dialogue happening where we're trying to hash out this big stuff because we're all feeling the same. We've lived it and know it needs to be changed. So the committee, I've sat on tons of committees, and this committee I leave every time exhausted but also excited about what we might be able to come up with when we're done. So
Thank you.
questions, I'm kind of absorbing all that already, so I can go
Yeah.
and pull that in.
Yeah.
It's exciting stuff. We can pull it off.
I think we can. I'm optimistic. Okay, if there's no other questions about that, I'm going to switch to my second topic. Do I still have time? Okay. So second topic, right on. This is just a quick preview. We have seen an escalation over the last couple of years, and especially this year, in our elementary students accessing inappropriate content online. See lots of head nods. Yep. And as we look at our internal data, there's a couple of sites that rise to the top that kids are accessing right now to see that inappropriate content. And those two sites are YouTube and Vimeo. So we've had a conversation about what we can do about that. And what we're thinking is for students only, this will not impact staff, and only for students at the elementary level, we will block access to YouTube and Vimeo. So if you're an elementary teacher and you want to show a YouTube video, you can still show the YouTube video. You'll still have access to that, but we're not going to let students access that content using their student login. Now, I want to be clear, that doesn't mean they can't access inappropriate content. Kids are clever. They find ways around systems. We know that. And we're only talking about blocking 2 video sites, but these are the sites that rise to the top of our data in terms of the inappropriate content that kids are accessing. So we think this is an important step to try and keep our littlest ones safe. We are not at this time making any changes to the secondary internet policies. So what questions can I answer for you about that? Yes.
Suzanne, does that YouTube block the Momo thing that's going on? Is that coming through YouTube?
Yeah. 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 Yeah, but it'll block. Yeah. So it could catch some of that Momo content. It'll stop like the Jeffy videos and some of those other things at the elementary level that we know are just awful and kids shouldn't be watching anyway. And now they just won't be able to watch that when they're on our devices on our network. We think it's an important safety step to take for our youngest students. Yes? If it's not going out to the YouTube site, it should still work, but we can test that and make sure of that. This change doesn't go into effect right away. We have a little bit of a lead up to this, so we're starting with the communication with this group. We'll do some communicating with our administrators as well to make sure that they can get their questions answered. We'll send out some general communication to all elementary staff. And probably wouldn't make this change. Bob and I haven't landed on an exact date, but I'm thinking not until after spring break at the earliest, because we want to make sure that we get questions answered and we vet some of those things before just making something happen. So we'll look into that and make sure that it won't impact the use of Google Classroom in any way. What other questions can I answer for you? All right, fantastic. Thanks for your time. Oh, Bob has his hand up.
Do any of the secondary teachers feel that this should be done for secondary students?
So the question is, do any of the secondary teachers here feel like we should also do this at the secondary level?
That was like, I'm not sure.
No, in general. I think just the general oversight as far as keeping track of students, but I guess part of my comment goes back to the idea about things being embedded, because there are quality videos as far as reviewing materials and different things like that, especially some of the courses like advanced placement courses where there's lots of experts out there, lots of kids generating stuff that's really good, but if kids can't get access because just a few people are making poor choices, that doesn't seem necessarily right.
Yep. Thank you, Bob. All right, if you have any other thoughts about that, again, shoot me an email. I'd love to hear them. Thank you.
Okay, that's the end of the agenda. We will stay till 5:15 if you have questions, but anyone who wants to go, have a great few weeks leading up to spring break and do everything you can as spring break to check out of work. Okay? Okay, all right. Thank you. Have a good afternoon, and we'll be around if you have questions.